That night, I stood silently by the glass window, watching the city lights stretch endlessly beneath me, feeling the weight of the air like cold, suffocating water. Every tick of the clock echoed a question that burned inside me. How does someone become a stranger in their own family after once being the child who clung tightly to every memory, believing they'd always matter? Have you ever felt like an invisible guest in your own home? The one who carries every burden quietly, only to be quietly erased. I believed that if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, and kept my silence, I'd one day be embraced with genuine gratitude. But all I found was a biting silence, curt replies to my messages, and family group chats that vanished overnight without a single explanation. Betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It often comes wrapped in the name you once called family. One day, I received a video from my cousin. There they were laughing, glasses raised in a toast, beside the luxury villa where I held the bill. And then came the chilling words, "We finally dumped him." My hand trembled over my phone, my heart shattered, and beneath the pain stirred a quiet fire, one that would soon rise to reclaim everything I thought I lost. What follows isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a journey of standing up, of demanding respect, and of redefining what family truly means. Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Now, sit back and enjoy the story. Would you like me to help with more parts of the script? The truth is, betrayal rarely strikes like lightning. It creeps in, quietly, through moments we're taught to ignore. My roots ran deep in a family that outsiders praised as tight-knit, the kind who gathered for every birthday, filled photo albums with matching t-shirts, who claimed blood was thicker than anything else. That's what everyone believed. Maybe, for a while, I did too. My earliest memories? Laughter echoing in the tiny living room, my mom's hands weaving paper crowns for birthdays. My brother, older and charismatic, tugged me into mischief-breaking curfew for late-night movie marathons, swearing secrecy. My younger sister, brilliant and sensitive, pressed her head against my chest during thunderstorms, trembling until I told her the storm would pass. We were a team. That's what I kept telling myself. We were supposed to be. But looking back honestly, bravely, there were cracks beneath the surface. I'd catch it in the glances traded across the dinner table, a certain coldness in my father's voice when the subject turned to my dreams. "That's nice," he'd say, but his eyes flicked past me, settling on my brother. "Tell us about your soccer match instead." Never once did anyone ask about the novel I was writing, the sketches I hid under my bed. It was a subtle thing over years. That subtlety became a language. He's the practical one. He always helps. He won't mind. What sounds like praise is sometimes just permission to use you. I remember one summer, Grandpa's gold watch went missing. Fingers pointed first, quickly, then quietly toward me. I was, after all, the last one in the guest room. I spent the night curled in shame, reciting every minute of my day, desperate to understand how I'd become the usual suspect. When Grandma found the watch under her gardening gloves, no one apologized. The next day, my brother laughed. "You really had us going." There were apologies over burnt toast, spilled milk, but over trust, there was always silence. There were other moments, two subtle wounds with sharp edges. My sister once forged my signature to skip a math test. I took the blame when she was caught. "You're good at talking to teachers," she pleaded, her eyes shining with guilt. The truth. I said yes because the thought of seeing her cry hurt me more than the punishment. Each tiny sacrifice pressed me tighter against a role I never auditioned for. The fixer, the quiet glue, the family's invisible net. As I grew, so did the expectations. I'd stay up fixing my brother's college essays while he snuck out to parties the next morning. He'd barely murmur thanks before heading off with friends. When my family's finances grew tight, it was me who took the summer job, quietly slipping cash to Mom under the dinner table. No one ever remembered, but everybody depended on me. The worst part wasn't the weight. It was realizing, year after year, that my love for them was measured in what I could do, never in who I was. I saw it when my birthday gifts grew practical. "You'll need this for work." When group photos appeared without me. When I'd organize family holidays only to be left out of the plans. Yet each time, I told myself it was nothing, that it would pass. That maybe I just needed to make myself smaller, quieter, easier. I watched as my needs became negotiable, my presence optional. But even back then, the ache of invisibility never truly vanished. And as I got older, and those subtle slights grew into open wounds, the cracks in our foundation became fault lines. I began to wonder, in quiet moments, did anyone see me at all, or just the version of me they found useful? And underneath it all, a single, painful question haunted me, one I was too afraid to ask then, but would be forced to face in time. What if the thing holding us together wasn't love, but convenience? As I stepped into adulthood, the patterns only grew sharper, more dangerous. What started as innocent mistakes and you won't mind, right? Soon became full-scale erasure, exclusion, and, eventually, betrayal. But that's a story I'll have to tell you in the next chapter. The shadows of childhood don't fade. They sharpen, preparing for the inevitable fracture. And for me, that breaking point was far closer than I ever imagined. Every story of betrayal is built on silent eruptions ears when you bleed for others, hoping someone, anyone, will notice. Here's where my family's mask began to slip. In the trades I made, my comfort for their happiness grew too lopsided to bear. Sacrifice snuck in like a shadow. A few dollars lent here, a school tuition quietly paid off there. It was me who balanced bills when mom's shifts got cut. Me who paid my brother's car note just until graduation. And me who loaned my name, my credit when my father's business hit a rocky patch. No one announced these debts. They were always just between us. Two outsiders. We were the picture of support. Inside, I was an open ATM, my kindness mistaken for infinite giving. I tried to tell myself it was normal. That's what families do, right? But things changed when giving slipped from acts of love to silent expectations and then to demands. Each phone call from my father came laced with an undercurrent. So, do you think you could help us cover this one last thing? The last time never came. My brother stopped asking entirely. He'd just de-transfer requests. My sister, always sweet, would guilt-trip me with words like it's tough out here, some of us don't have your luck, as if decades of hard work and sleepless nights could be summed up by a coin toss. The pattern wasn't just about money, it was about presence and then, about absence. My cousin Jamie, sharp-eyed and honest, noticed before I did. "You're never in any pictures anymore," she said one day, flicking through her phone. "Do you not get invited, or do you always say no?" The question stung. Group chats shifted topics just when I joined. Reunions and birthday plans sailed quietly past my calendar. Once, I organized a whole family trip, only to find the date mysteriously moved up without a word to me after. I arranged the logistics. That was how I learned to read between the lines. They didn't say, "Don't come." Instead, I'd hear, "We weren't sure you'd be free," or "You seem so busy these days." The narrative twisted. I was always working, too responsible, not the fun one. Each label, a curtain, pulled over eyes that didn't care to see past my usefulness. Sometimes, I'd try to push back, to say no, just once. "I'm short this month," I told my dad. He sighed, a tired, disappointed sound, and hung up without goodbye. My brother's messages grew curt, then stopped. My sister sent a family selfie from a night out. "We missed you," but it arrived long after the fact. Her smiles sharp and edged. Secondary characters swirled through these years. My Aunt Lisa, who slipped me 20s and whispered, "Don't forget yourself." A college friend who wondered why I turned down every holiday trip. An ex-girlfriend who said, "You love your family more than you love yourself, and they'll never even say thank you." Each of them saw, before I did, how the sacrifices I made had turned me transparent. What hurts is not the giving, it's how. Each time I handed over a part of myself, it vanished like smoke. No thanks, no acknowledgement. Just another expectation added to the pile. The more I gave, the more I became a ghost at my own table, so necessary. I was invisible. By the time a new group chat formed a sly little circle called the core, my name was gone. When I asked, I got nothing but empty emojis and a flurry of silence. That's when I began to realize, systematic exclusion doesn't look like a slammed door. It looks like leaving the lock changed, and pretending you lost the key yourself. Pain grew into a dull ache, then a question. At what point does a sacrifice stop being love, and start being self-erasure? Each fresh slight layered bitterness on old wounds, but still, I clung to hope. Maybe if I just tried harder, maybe, this time, things would be different. But as another birthday came and went with a single obligatory text message, I felt it, the walls closing in. The understanding that, to them, I wasn't a member of the family. I was a foundation, something to step on without ever looking down. That pressure, that quiet despair, is how the next storm built inside me, a storm that would finally break, for better or worse. But it wouldn't explode until the one event that changed everything. And that's where the betrayal turned from whispers into something I could no longer ignore. The flicker of doubt became a blaze of revelation. And in the next part, you'll see just how far a family will go to secure their convenience, even if it means losing one of their own. Betrayal never arrives like a storm warning. It creeps in, slow and quiet, until one day you realize the world has shifted beneath your feet and no one bothered to tell you that it started with a lie so small. I almost missed it. My boss, Mr. Carroll, stopped by my desk, confusion crinkling his eyes. "Didn't you say you couldn't take time off next week?" he asked. "Your sister emailed last Thursday, said you volunteered to work during the big deployment." He turned his screen for me to read the message. There it was. My name, my words, but not my hand. My sister, the one I'd covered for countless times, had made me the reason I was to be left behind. I tried to laugh it off, but inside, something hollowed out. It was precision, icy, calculated exclusion. Then, one evening, right after dinner, another crack formed. My phone buzzed, a video from my cousin Jamie. I pressed play, thinking it was a memory, maybe an old inside joke. Instead, I saw my entire family, faces radiant in the golden glow of a luxury beachfront villa, the very trip I'd bankrolled, every penny discreetly drafted from my own account. Laughter filled the air, glasses clinked, and then Jamie raised hers, to a new chapter. We finally let him go. In the corner, my brother muttered, "He's just money with a name." My own mother, who once brushed back my hair after nightmares, toasted to freedom. In that single, searing moment, every scar I'd tried to rationalize burst open. I was invisible right until they needed a receipt. The pain wasn't sharp, it was suffocating. I sat there, surrounded by a silence so heavy it buzzed in my ears. I scrolled through messages, not a single missed call, no invitation, no warning. I looked for an explanation, a misunderstanding, a signal of remorse. None came. There was only the video rewound, replayed, burned into my mind. Betrayal clean, unapologetic, public. I walked out into the night, wind on my face, unsure what to feel. Rage, sure. Humiliation, absolutely. But beneath everything else was grief, the death of hope. The realization that family bonds once my anchor were now knots around my throat. The days that followed blurred together. I cut myself off from contact, my phone filling with afterthought, texts, half-hearted apologies, excuses about poor communication, as if I'd simply missed the train by mistake. My father, normally stoic, texted, "You always overreact to things. We just figured you'd be too busy. Don't be dramatic." That's when something snapped on all at once. But gradually, as every memory, every moment of unspoken sacrifice flashed in front of me. Each forgotten birthday, each borrowed dollar, never repaid, each, "It's fine. I'll handle it," I'd whispered, just to keep the peace. None of it mattered. Not to them. Not anymore. And then came the breaking point the night I canceled the villa. As their laughter echoed across the ocean and the lights glimmered in their artificial paradise. I sat with my laptop open, confirmation email on the screen. I hesitated, fingers trembling. Was I cruel? Was I finally the villain in their story? Or was this the first time I'd chosen myself? Ever. I hit cancel. In that moment, I wasn't ashamed. I was relieved. The power they held over me evaporated like the champagne fizzing out on that rented terrace. I imagined their panic, lights flickering, the chef gone, the pool chilled, the chilled silence when they realized the hand that fed them had finally let go. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. All I felt was emptied of duty, emptied of guilt, emptied of the endless need for validation. The fallout was fast. My sister's frantic voicemail, "Please call me. Dad's upset, we're stranded." My mother's Facebook post, painting me as troubled, a warning to the world about wayward sons who lose their way. My brother's DM, alternating blame and begging, "You ruined everything, you left us with nothing." But I had nothing left to give. I was done being anyone's savior or scapegoat. The old me might have drowned in shame. But now, bathed in the honesty of their betrayal, I sat last what needed to be done. It was time to stand my ground and reclaim the narrative. My pain would no longer be their convenience. My story, my family, would no longer be defined by their versions. That's when survival turned into something fierce and beautiful, a choice to bloom. Even if no one cheered me on, and, as the dust settled, and the final emails faded into oblivion, I realized, breaking isn't the end. Sometimes, it's the first breath of freedom. Asterisk in the next chapter. You'll watch what happens when everything you once called home shatters. How the fallout, both online and off, redraws the lines between loyalty and liberation. Asterisk sitting alone. In the midnight quiet of my new apartment, I felt that familiar ache, a wound, left by those who should have been safe harbor, not a storm. But for the first time, pain didn't paralyze me. It fueled something sharper, something that burned away the resignation and made space for resolve. That night, the night my family's celebration turned to panic, was the first time I realized that I, too, held power. I just had to choose myself. It began with the villa. My fingers hovered over the cancellation button as 1,000 memories flickered through my mind, whispered apologies I never received, parties where my chair sat empty, cards I funded but never signed. In that moment, their laughter was still echoing through my phone, a digital ghost haunting every shadow in my room. How many years had I swallowed disappointment, convincing myself I was just unlucky, just misunderstood? But this wasn't misunderstanding, it was erasure. For once, I refused to disappear. My heart pounded as I clicked cancel, feeling as if the world should halt, as if satellites should blink out. Nothing happened, just a pop-up message. "Your booking has been successfully canceled." The silence was suddenly immense. Then my phone lit up with a barrage of calls, voicemails, first angry, then desperate. My brother, "What did you do?" My mother, "Please honey, fix this." My father, silent at first, then blunt, "You're embarrassing us." For once, their needs did not move me. Their panic was the mirror image of every anxious night I'd spent waiting for a reply that never came. But taking back control required more than a single act of rebellion. It required exposure, a raw honesty that bared every secret, every slight. I gathered up evidence no one ever thought I'd keep. screenshots of bank transfers, old emails asking me to handle it. Just this time, the video of their champagne, toast, and even the message from my boss proof that this was not an accident, but a campaign of quiet disownment. There was fear, yes. Posting everything so publicly felt like holding a match to my own past. Would people believe me? Would I be painted the villain, or just another oversensitive child? But in the darkness, a new certainty bloomed. This was my story. No one could bend it for their comfort anymore, so I shared it all, every receipt, every screenshot, every brush off and betrayal, unfiltered and unflinching, on every platform I had. The response was explosive. Thousands of strangers sent messages, some in tears, some in rage, others just saying thank you for telling my story too. My cousin Jamie messaged, "I'm sorry. I should have said something." Aunt Lisa called just to say she was proud. But not everyone was supportive. My sister wrote emails, first pleading, then threatening, then claiming it was all a misunderstanding. My father posted his version online. Old friends of the family took sides. My mother played the victim, telling neighbors about my breakdown. For every show of support, there was backlash, a wave I had to weather, with a shaken but growing sense of self. Even then, my biggest battle wasn't with them. It was with myself, letting go of guilt that wasn't mine, learning that setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel, it makes you free. Each day, I read messages from people who wanted hope. Not retribution: the mom who wired grocery money to her sons until her own fridge was empty. The son who'd been blocked from Thanksgiving for finally saying no. The world, it turned out, is full of those who've loved too quietly for too long. And as my story spread, I felt the tide turn inside me. I no longer wanted revenge. I wanted release. The power my family held was gone. In its place was something I'd never known: respect, not just from others, but from myself. And as I watched my parents, my siblings, struggle with consequences they never imagined having to face, I wondered, would they ever feel remorse, or just regret that the story got out? That answer would come later, in a wave of new challenges and realizations. But at that moment, for the first time in my life, I was more than what I could give. I was someone who could choose himself, even at the cost of a dream called family. Would force us all, me, them, maybe even you, to face the fallout, public scrutiny, isolation, the messy aftermath of long-held secrets coming to light. But that story, about the cost of truth and the price of liberation, is one we're about to unravel. The truth is, when secrets spill out and masks shatter, the consequences don't end at the click of post. They ripple outward, inward, in directions you never see coming. I had spent years bracing myself for the day my family would stop needing me. I was not prepared for what happens when, overnight, I stopped needing them. The fallout was immediate and vicious. Online, the story exploded. Strangers flocking to my messages, some furious at the ungrateful child who turned on his own, others whispering their thanks, confessions of silent suffering, of being erased and overlooked. Just like me, my siblings clung to denial, inventing new lies and excuses as if the world could be spun around their version a little longer. My brother posted, "Family always comes first, lest you're betrayed," uncaring that thousands had seen his toasts, his words. My mother, desperate, painted herself the heartbroken victim on Facebook, complete with filtered photos of tear-streaked cheeks and hashtags about perseverance. Winter set into our household, cold, resentful, and unyielding. Their group chats flared with blame, each hungry to find a new scapegoat for their loss of status, for having to slink home from the villa in economy without champagne or staff. Old family friends called to check in, but their questions were never about me. Is it true you cut them off? Why would you air dirty laundry in public? It stung, knowing how fast loyalty evaporates when money and reputation dry up. But the true damage wasn't in the online spectacle. It was in the homesickness nobody talks about. The empty holidays. The phone humming with unread apologies one minute, venom the next. Credit cards locked. Joint accounts gone. The comfort of someone always has your back replaced by the cold, clean edge of self-reliance. My parents scrambled to stay afloat. Bills mounting. Favors called in that were never returned. There were days I almost broke, wanting to dial home, to comfort, to fix, as I always had before. What I hadn't realized was how many watched from the sidelines, friends I hadn't heard from in years, sending texts. "Saw your post. Are you okay?" My boss, Mr. Carroll, quietly offered a new project. Aunt Lisa sent a small box of cookies and a handwritten note. "You did what I never could. Don't carry their shame." My ex-girlfriend reached out for the first time, not to blame, but to admit, "I always knew they'd break you, if you let them." The emotional fallout ran deepest. There were nights when the quiet roared, when I grieved not the people they were, but the family I'd hoped for. The guilt came in waves, crashing against the small islands of anger left behind. Some mornings, I almost reached for my phone to message my sister until I remembered she'd only ever called when she needed something. I started to see the old patterns for what they were: survival mechanisms, not affection. For the first time, I let myself mourn, not their absence, but the years I'd spent making myself invisible. Yet a strange thing happened. The painful emptiness gave way to space for friends who asked nothing in return, for colleagues who respected my boundaries, for strangers who wanted only to be understood. The world did not collapse. I did not disappear. In learning to say no, I built a boundary no one could breach again. And amidst the wreckage, my story became a beacon for others, a podcast for the unheard, a message for those still trapped in cycles of debt and silence. The cost of truth was high: public scorn, private tears, and the end of what little warmth my family offered. But what I gained was priceless: freedom from manipulation, and the first, quiet seeds of self-respect. But the story didn't end with my pain. Healing, as I'd discover, is a journey in itself, a rebuilding, a remaking, not just of my life, but of how I understood love, family, and what it means to finally come home to yourself. Next comes the hardest part: not revenge, not survival, but rediscovering who you are when your old world is gone. The chapter where loss becomes liberation, and where the empty chair at the dinner table proves to be the best seat in the house. In the aftermath of losing everything I thought rooted me, there was a strange unyielding silence, a hush, that pressed in at dawn and stretched long past midnight. For the first time, no one demanded my energy, no messages pinged at odd hours, and the chronic ache to please dissolved into the stillness of my own space. In that silence, healing didn't come with fanfare. It arrived uncertain, awkward, like stepping onto ice for the first time, unsure whether I'd slip or glide. Those first mornings I made coffee for one and watched sunbeams inch up my living room wall. At night, I'd lie awake, flooded by memories: my brother's laughter, my mother's lullabies, scenes of family dinners where I measured love by how well I filled everyone's glass but my own. The guilt was relentless at first, echoing voices telling me I was selfish, ungrateful, heartless for walking away. There were nights my trembling hand hovered over my phone, almost dialing home, desperate for anything familiar. But the world, curiously, did not end. It widened. Friends who might have remained in the background began to step forward. Maggie from work, who invited me for a spontaneous road trip and never asked why my eyes looked stormy. My neighbor, Mrs. Green, slipped books under my door, stories of chosen families and gentle heroes just because. Dear, even strangers, listeners from the podcast wrote letters, spoke their truths, gifting me a new, unspoken kinship. In those fragments, I rebuilt the sense of belonging, one sincere invitation at a time. Therapy became a quiet revolution, the sacred hour-long spaces where someone finally looked at me and saw the whole person, not a living solution to someone else's problems. I learned to recognize love in boundaries, in forgiving myself for surviving the only way I ever could. I started journaling again, dusting off dreams I'd shelved for years. I learned that sometimes healing feels less like victory and more like sitting with your sadness until it softens into something merciful. There were moments, still, when shame burned at family birthdays I missed, holidays spent alone. But gradually, loneliness became solitude, then a kind of freedom. My podcast blossomed into a community: messages from people everywhere, survivors who'd lost their seats at the table, but built new ones in open sunlit kitchens, mothers, sons, daughters, reclaiming their worth, one hesitating breath at a time. Their stories, braided with mine, rewrote what family could mean. The old myth, blood is everything, gave way to a new truth. Family is where you are loved, and where you love, freely and without debt. One Sunday, months later, I hosted a dinner in my tiny apartment. Around my table sat souls who'd seen my heartbreak, not to exploit it, but to honor it. We laughed over burnt lasagna, them teasing me about my stubborn optimism and terrible taste in music. In that moment, I realized I had built my own family, chosen and cherished. Not perfect, but real. As we raised glasses to the future, I understood for the first time the feeling of coming home. Yes, I mourned what I lost. I still do, some nights, and maybe I always will. But I have learned, losing your old world is not the end. Sometimes it is only the clearing where you can finally plant something new. If you ever find yourself sitting in the ruins, remember, you deserve a place at your own table. You are not defined by the stories others wrote for you, but by the one you choose to tell from here. This is my new beginning. May it inspire yours. And if any part of this story finds you, I hope you let us know in the comments where you are, and who you are building your new family with, even if it's just yourself. Because sometimes, the best seat at the table is the one you choose for yourself. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Your support truly means the world to me. If you found the story meaningful or thought-provoking, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And I'd love to hear your thoughts or suggestions in the comments below, so we can make the next videos even better together. Thanks again for being here, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon.